October 31st, 2009, 5 days after widowed periodontist Philip Gattuso was bludgeoned to death inside his Fargo, North Dakota condo, police arrest Michael Nakvinda. The ex-con from Oklahoma is suspected of committing the murder and stealing items from Gattuso's home, including his prized Porsche convertible.
Detectives interrogate Gattuso's father-in-law, Gene Kirkpatrick, in Oklahoma City. When officers bluff Kirkpatrick that Nakvinda implicated him in the murder, he reveals that he and Nakvinda, his former handyman, had discussions about killing Gattuso and had even gone over a fee for doing so.
However, Kirkpatrick denies ever giving Nakvinda the green light to kill his son-in-law. Police let him walk. However, they continue to gather evidence and information that could lead to his arrest as well.
On November 1st, the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation gets a tip from James Young, the owner of a storage facility.
Young says he saw Michael Nakvinda's picture on the news and believes Nakvinda paid him cash for a storage space at his facility on October 27. Surveillance footage soon confirms the renter was in fact Nakvinda.
Police search the unit Nakvinda rented, C28, the following morning. Inside, they find Philip Gattuso's Porsche Boxster covered by a tarp.
Inside the trunk, agents find various items from Gattuso's home, including a computer monitor and loose jewelry. Inside the vehicle, they find a bloody hammer, which tests positive for Gattuso's blood.
Following the discoveries, Gene Kirkpatrick is arrested at home and charged with conspiracy to commit murder and burglary.
Both Kirkpatrick and Nakvinda are eventually extradited from Oklahoma to North Dakota and held on $1 million cash bail each at Cass County Jail.
Many friends in the family of Gene Kirkpatrick are unconvinced of his guilt. In February 2010, a longtime friend posts Gene's bail.
As prosecutors prep for trial, they must solve the puzzle of how the lives of an ex-con, a concerned grandfather, and a successful periodontist intersected in murder.
Michael Nakvinda was born in June 1968 and raised in Oklahoma City. His father's a car salesman. His mother's a seamstress, whose talent for craftsmanship rubs off on him. As a young man, he works on furniture. However, he eventually turns to a life of crime.
In 1988, Michael is a married 20-year-old father when he pleads guilty to concealing stolen property, which lands him 3 years in jail. Soon after his release, Nakvinda receives 4 more years when he's found in possession of a pistol.
In 1994, Nakvinda commits a series of blitz-style home invasion robberies, making off with jewelry, drugs, large sums of cash. He eventually pleads guilty to 1 count of kidnapping, 9 counts of robbery with a firearm. He receives a 20-year sentence, yet is released in October 2002 after serving just 8 years.
Nakvinda returns to Oklahoma City, lives with his mother, and begins a handyman business, which is how he eventually meets Gene Kirkpatrick.
Gene Kirkpatrick was born in August 1946 and grows up in Oklahoma. At 20, he enlists in the Marine Corps Reserves, where he serves as a field radio operator and wireman.
Following his honorable discharge in 1972, Gene works in the telecommunications industry. He and his wife Sharon raised their 2 daughters, Reagan and Valerie.
Valerie Kirkpatrick meets Philip Gattuso in 2002. A year later, she becomes his 3rd wife.
Valerie gives birth to daughter Kennedy in April of 2006. Approximately 16 months later, in August of 2007, she undergoes heart surgery. Unfortunately, her health deteriorates in the hospital to the point where her toes and then eventually her leg are amputated.
Valerie moves back to Oklahoma City to be near her family while she rehabilitates, but Philip remains in Fargo. According to Valerie's father, Gene, Philip becomes distant during the time apart, which adds more stress to his wife's situation.
Eventually, Philip sells his practice in order to join the family in Oklahoma. However, under his contract, he must stay on for 6 months to help transition his patients to a new dentist.
On March 30th, 2009, Valerie dies of prolonged complications from her heart surgery.
Gene takes Valerie's death especially hard. He's convinced that Philip was weak in dealing with his daughter's illness, and he had hemmed and hawed over medical decisions that could have saved her life.
Gene then concludes that Philip is unfit to raise his granddaughter, Kennedy. He wants his daughter, Reagan, Kennedy's aunt, to have permanent custody so they can raise Kennedy in Oklahoma City.
While Reagan looks into the legal remedies to gain custody of Kennedy, Gene conspires with his handyman, Michael Nakvinda, to guarantee the change in his granddaughter's guardianship through deceit, murder, and a proposed $13,000 payday.
By November 2nd, less than a week after the brutal murder of Philip Gattuso in Fargo, North Dakota, law enforcement has arrested 2 suspects, 63-year-old Gene Kirkpatrick and his 41-year-old handyman, Michael Nakvinda. Homicide detectives allege that Kirkpatrick, who's the father of Gattuso's deceased wife, commissioned Nakvinda to commit the killing for an agreed-upon fee of $13,000, $3,000 up front, the remaining $10,000 after Gattuso was dead and gone.
Police believe that on Monday, October 26, 2009, Nakvinda parked in the Bowler parking lot, then went inside Gattuso's residence. After Gattuso returned home from dropping off Kennedy at daycare, Nakvinda blindsided him and beat him in the head with a hammer.
It's suspected now that after the brutal murder, Nakvinda loaded up Philip Gattuso's Porsche. He then stole items from his house as an added form of payment, and then drove back home to Oklahoma City.
Fargo, North Dakota, Tuesday, November 30th, 2010, 9:30 a.m. The murder trial of Michael Nakvinda gets underway at Cass County District Court.
The state relies on security videos and eyewitness testimony. They lay out a chain of evidence ending at a storage unit Nakvinda rented in Oklahoma City, where he hid Philip Gattuso's Porsche Boxster, which had the murder weapon in its back seat.
The defense maintains that Nakvinda was never in Fargo. They argue that Gene Kirkpatrick merely paid him to pick up Gattuso's Porsche, which Kirkpatrick had told him he'd purchased.
The defense further alleges that Kirkpatrick directed Nakvinda to a residence in Wapaton, North Dakota, where he spent the night of October 25th. He woke up the next morning there, and his truck had already been loaded with Gattuso's Porsche by the homeowner, who had retrieved it from Fargo.
Prosecutors counter, arguing that the timeline established by security video and eyewitnesses did not support a trip to Wapaton.
Debbie Baker, one of Nakvinda's clients, testifies about how before the murder, Michael told her he could get rid of Philip Gattuso and would use a hammer to do the deed.
Baker's testimony leads Nakvinda to take the stand in his own defense. His retort is to claim that his ex-friend and employer, Gene Kirkpatrick, knew about his criminal past and is framing him.
The jury doesn't buy Nakvinda's argument. On December 10, 2010, they find him guilty of murder and all of the charges related to the property he stole from Phil Gattuso.
The following month, Nakvinda is sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Fargo, North Dakota, Thursday, July 21st, 2011. The prosecution of Gene Kirkpatrick begins at Cass County District Court.
The state uses Kirkpatrick's initial police interview and the revelations he made as the crux of the case against him.
The recorded interview paints a clear picture of how, after his daughter Valerie died in March 2009, Kirkpatrick wanted his granddaughter Kennedy to be raised in Oklahoma, not in Fargo with her father.
The state alleges that custody over Kennedy was the motive behind Kirkpatrick's conspiring with Nakvinda to murder Philip Gattuso. They argue the near $2,500 in cash that had been recovered from Michael Nakvinda's bedroom was in fact part of the payment from Kirkpatrick to kill Gattuso.
Gattuso's friend Julie Willard testifies. She explains how Philip's in-laws hated him and had been pressuring him for a while to hand over custody of Kennedy.
Prosecutors back up Willard's statement by asserting that Gene Kirkpatrick told more than 100 people about his frustrations with his son-in-law.
The defense now counters. They claim that even though Kirkpatrick ranted about his son-in-law at times, provided Nakvinda with footage he recorded at Gattuso's condo and discussed the cost and probability of the hit, there was no valid agreement between the two of them to actually go ahead with the murder.
On Thursday, July 28, 2011, the jury finds Gene Kirkpatrick guilty of conspiracy to commit intentional murder and burglary.
3 months later, a judge sentences Kirkpatrick to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Murder is never a good explanation for addressing grievances. And ultimately, the granddaughter's left without anybody. No father, no grandfather. Everybody's gone over nothing. And that's really a shame.